Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come speak to you guys today. One of the beauties of speaking at a church like this is that I think I know everybody already. But for anybody who doesn't know, my name is Andy. I work in a ministry called Oaks International at CSU. And my wife here up front is Andrea. Then we have our three sons, Peter, Azariah, and Timothy. And then in the back is my mom and my brother and my sister-in-law and our adopted son, Daniel, from Brazil. No. Yeah. He's 19. It's not legal. Like, we can't legally adopt him, but we've really tried, so trust me. So yeah, it's a real honor to come up here and speak about one of the things I care about most, which is making disciples among the lost. And I brought some of the Oaks here today because one of the mission statements of Oaks is to proclaim Christ, multiply disciple makers, for the glory of God and the joy of all nations. So one of our baked-in DNA statements is that we are multiplying disciple makers. And I've seen everybody that's sitting here today. Here, raise your hand if you're a part of Oaks and you came today. Yeah, all right. So you guys are... I'm going to do a little competition here as we go and say, raise your hand if you're doing X, Y, or Z, and I feel like I'm going to have a pretty strong showing among the Oaks crew here. So really, it's an honor to be a part of that group. Yeah, so where we are in our series is the Great Commission. We've done last week, in the last couple of weeks, we've done going, which is in missions. This week, we're starting into making disciples. So I know for a lot of you guys, the idea, maybe not for a lot of you guys, but the idea of leaving a good-paying engineering job to go make disciples on a college campus maybe seems weird. I know for a lot of you Ratio Christi guys, it doesn't seem weird at all, does it? But I think after the events of the last couple of weeks, we can start to see that battlefield forming, can't we? This last week, we were out on Thursday, the day that Charlie Kirk was supposed to be coming and speaking on campus, and I just felt this heavy weight that we had to get out there and we had to share the gospel that day. So a couple of these guys here, raise your hand if you're out there with me that day. Yeah, see? All right. So I think the way I kept describing it was I felt like if you could see what was happening spiritually above us on that plaza that day, it felt like it was D-Day spiritually. I watched, we have a lot of people who will go, I don't know really what I think about Christianity. I guess I'm kind of Christian. And by the time they're done with us, they'll go, I'm on fire for my faith. I want to pursue God. That's a lot of people. But you know what I've rarely seen is someone totally 180 their life for Jesus. And I saw multiple of those people just this Thursday on this campus. I mean, we had one girl come up to us early in the morning. She had piercings all through her face. I thought, oh man, this is not going to be good. And I know, I'm sorry, I do judge sometimes. I try not to, but I went, oh boy, all right, here we go, I'm ready. And it wasn't what I expected at all. This girl just broke down in tears, and she said, something changed inside of me. She's like, and I don't know what to do with it. I need hope. I need something. And we just started telling her about Jesus, and she's now going to be discipled by one of our students. So that's why we're there. Statistics show that most people who turn their life over to Jesus do it before the age of 30. I'm not going to say the engineering term for everybody after the age of 30, but it's negligible. If you were to take a percentage of the people who turn their life, young people, it's a very specific and strategic time. So as we go and talk about making disciples today, I just want to briefly touch on why we're doing what we're doing, and maybe you can just think of those statistics in your mind too as we go on. I'm not going to show them today. So I'm of the belief that when Jesus says the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few, that's actually an eternally significant thing, which means what we lack is labor. What we lack is not a harvest. And specifically in today's day and age and in this time, I'm just here to tell you guys today, from someone who's been out harvesting on the fields are white. They're ready for harvest. They're white for harvest. I feel like the time is not 10 years from now. I don't want to talk about a strategic 5-year plan. Now's the time to labor. Yeah. This is the time to get to laboring. The fields are white. They're ready for harvest. So my goal today is that you guys would all walk out of here thinking, I have something to do. I'm going to go do something this week. So that's my goal for today. So let's get into the preaching passage. Matthew 28:19-20, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. I realized after making my slides that PK is using a different translation than I am. So his has obey, I have observe. Anyway, so please forgive me for that, PK, when you watch this. So go and make disciples. I think back to how do people receive these words when they were actually first said? I think that's one of our best ways that we can analyze Scripture. And at the time that the disciples were hearing these, things weren't awesome. Let's just call it like that, right? It wasn't like, hey man, go out, everybody's just gonna love you guys, It's not. That's not the case. In fact, 10 of the 11 disciples went out and died for the gospel with these words still ringing in their ear not long after this. And I think they knew it. That's the crazy part, isn't it? So what did they hear when Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples of all nations? And behold, I'll be with you always, even to the end. I'm sure they felt much the same way we are. Maybe a little bit of trepidation, maybe a little bit of, how do I actually do that? Is this going to be possible? I'm a little nervous. I'm a little scared. And I think a lot of us get in that mindset, but just so that you know, that's probably how the disciples felt too. And yet they went and did it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, because we're first in this week on disciple making, is what is a disciple? What exactly is he asking us to make? And here's the analogy I've been giving for this. All right, so 2 months ago, Andrea came in. That's not 2 months ago. It's maybe 6 months ago. She said, hey, I have something for you. You need to build this. And the label on the box was something like Oxstad or something like that, and which turned out was Swedish for cheap bookshelf. So if any of you speak Swedish, that's what it is. So much like, I thought to myself, hey, I have a professional engineering license. I think I can build a square, okay? And anyway, so I used the instructions vaguely. But if you're ever over at my house and you wonder why I'm telling my kids not to climb on the bookshelves, it's because somehow, somewhere, I know it's missing 4 screws, okay? So here's a moral of the story. I think a lot of us, we look at the picture on the box, all right? What's a disciple? But what instructions did Jesus actually leave us? So this is the goal today. I want to leave you guys with a few step-by-step instructions on making a disciple. Really pragmatic, obvious, easy instructions. So what's a disciple? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. A disciple is a pupil, a follower, or an adherent. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the word, but it designates a learner who not only just learns, but binds himself to a teacher in order to embrace that teacher's worldview and way of life. In all cases, it implies that the person not only accepts the views of the teacher, but that he is also, in practice, an adherent. So it's not just student, right? It's a believer and a student. It's someone who's embraced the teacher. He's literally bound himself to the teacher. It's a follower. Whatever you do, I do. Wherever you go, I go. That's a disciple. And when this word is first used, it's pretty obvious who the disciples are. But as time goes on and Jesus' earthly ministry comes to an end, it starts to become a little more confusing because this is a general term, disciple. All right, so how does Jesus define a disciple? Gotta have myself. Did I get ahead of myself? No, I got behind myself. See, guys, this is what happens when you're debut speaking, as Ty said. All right, so basically, what Jesus says, and basically what a disciple is that it's just someone who follows Jesus. But as Jesus' earthly ministry passes away, people start to ask the question, disciple of who, right? It's not just disciple. It's like, who are you following? Who's the person that you're bound to? And in Acts 11:26, we see that in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. So, Christian literally just means disciple of Jesus, right? It's obvious when everybody's following him around and they go, he says, my disciples, and they go, oh yeah, there they are, just standing right next to him, right? But when Jesus dies and he's ascended to heaven, The question is, disciples of who? And the answer is disciples of Jesus. So another way that we could use that term is you could say, I'm a Kevinian, would be like an example, or a Julian, or something like that. And that probably felt that way when they first said it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a term that didn't exist before then, right? It's almost like you know how we always have new terms being invented on the internet? It's like one of those pop new terms. It's like Christian. What does that mean? Who is that? Well, it's the disciples of Jesus. It's those that follow Jesus. And here's what Jesus says about Christians. All right. These are what are the hallmarks of a disciple of Jesus. He says, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's John 8:31-32. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. That's John 15:8. And therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. That's John 14:33. So here's the twofold thing about being called a disciple of Jesus. One, it's not a special term. It's just being called a Christian. So if you're waiting for someone to bestow the title of disciple on you, you've kind of missed the whole point of what a disciple of Jesus is. But at the same end, it's a very extreme term, isn't it? It's something that demands everything we have. We abide in his word. We love one another, even those who are mocking and ridiculing us. We bear fruit, and we are ready to renounce everything here for the sake of the one that we're following, which is Jesus. So when someone calls you a Christian, this is what it's supposed to mean. So PK basically asked me to come up here today and talk about Christianity. So I was like, PK, you got to narrow it in a little bit. And he said, making disciples of the lost. So we're basically talking about evangelical Christianity this morning. So it's a pretty broad topic. All right. So how do we actually make these disciples? How do we make these kinds of people? And here we go. If you have your outline, this is step number 1. Select a few that God has given you. And I'm going to do an experiment in here today. Will you raise your hands if you became a Christian because someone you know personally invited you or discipled you, whether that's they brought you to church, whether this was your parents, whether this is a close friend or a minister who took special interest of you? Will you raise your hand if that's how you became a Christian and first came to the Lord? Okay, this was a risk, but I had a feeling. I'd say that's most everyone, but I'll do the other way around. Now, will you raise your hand if it was basically you on your own? Maybe you hit rock bottom. Maybe you saw a YouTube video. Maybe you just on your own volition went to a Billy Graham crusade. But you'd say, I can't name a specific person. And that's how you came to Jesus? Yeah, so they're out there. All right. And I think both of those are amazing. But it does speak to something true, doesn't it? Which is most everyone who comes to know the Lord, it's because someone took a personal interest. It was one person. It was a couple of people. It is, now we tend to put a lot of value on these massive, big campaigns and these big programs, but at the end of the day, the actual disciple-making model has always been just a few, you and just a few. Jesus himself chose just a few. In Luke 6:12-13, Jesus went out onto the mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, who he also designated as apostles. Now, Jesus had different sizes of followers, right? We can call disciples the crowds that are around him. We can call disciples the 70 or 72 in Acts, and we can call them the 12. And you could even go into the 3. But each of those levels has a different amount of Jesus' time being poured into them. And it should be telling that Jesus, God come in the flesh, chose a handful. Isn't that strange? And everybody who's sitting in here today is in some way, shape, or form here because of those few men that Jesus poured his time into and those women that were around them, and they poured into others, and they poured into others, and they poured into others, until billions with a B, have heard of Jesus and have in some way, shape, or form called themselves Jesus's followers. So someone pointed them there. So if Jesus chose 12, I think it's okay if you choose just a handful as well, don't you? All right, now I'm going to do another here, another little experiment, but let's see. If you guys have one or two people who you are currently discipling, will you raise your hand? All right, this is good to see. I knew Ken's was going to go up. All right, keep your hands up. Sorry. All right, if you guys have 3 that you're discipling, keep your hands up. 4, 5, 6. All right, Ken wins. Man, that's good. And you guys did well. All right, I was hoping somebody from Oaks was gonna take you for your money, Ken, but I knew it was going to be bad. Ken disciples me as well, by the way, so that's fair. You know, I was really struck by this passage the other day. You've probably never heard a sermon preached on this passage nor ever heard it from a pulpit, but it's 1 Kings 20:20. In 1 Kings, here's the context. Ben-Hadad brings 32 kings to overthrow Israel, and King Ahab is terrified. And, you know, long story short, it's a very complicated story. It's actually really, there's a lot in there. You guys should read it sometime. But King Ahab gets the word from a prophet that says, you know, God's going to give these armies into your hand. And finally he says, okay. And there's this one specific verse after King Ahab sends out these armies against Ben-Hadad and those that would seek to overthrow God's people. And this one verse really stuck out to me, which is, and each struck down his man. And I think about how many people get overwhelmed by the task of making disciples among the lost because there's just so many lost. Do you guys feel that way? It's bad out there. At my workplace, maybe I'm the only one. In my class, I feel like I'm the only one. And God, I can't reach everybody. And so you get in what, you know, you could call it analysis paralysis, or you just get, you know, fight, flight, or flee, and you just freeze there and you go, I just forget it. It's too much. I can't reach everybody. Well, here's the point. You don't have to. It is impossible just for you, but it is not impossible for God, and it's not impossible when we as the whole church take our man or take our woman. And this is the point I want to make for you guys today. Go into the enemy camp. You probably are thinking of somebody right now. Take your man. Take your woman. Bring them with you. Bring 1 or 2 from that enemy camp, and before you know it, we will change the entire world for Jesus. Pastor Kevin disciples a lot of people. Ken disciples a lot of people, but they're not going to make it past. I mean, Jesus did 12. Ken, I don't know if you're competing with Jesus at this point, but maybe you've got 15. I don't know. That's still not very many in the grand scheme of things, isn't it? But if everybody in this room took 1 or 2, and they poured into those people for just a year or 2, and those people poured into more, and they took 1 or 2, that's multiplication. That's how you reach the whole world. There will be people in here that I can never reach. Only you are equipped to reach them. So go into the enemy camp. Choose your 1 or 2. You know, how many people in here are grandfathers, great-grandfathers, by show of hands? All right. Now, here's a term I love. Has anybody ever heard the term spiritual grandfather or spiritual great-grandfather? Here's the point. Ken disciples me. I disciple a couple guys over here, Daniel. Daniel at Oaks Night the other night brings a guy to Jesus and now disciples him. Ken is now a spiritual great-grandfather. Isn't that cool? So that connection, how we go from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, Ken probably doesn't even know the name of the people he's impacted via that chain of spiritual disciple making. And many of you may not realize that, but when you pour into that one person, you have no idea the results that can come forward from it. So many of you in here, maybe you're spiritual babies, which is someone's always pouring into you. You're really just always needing help. But here's my calling. You ready? Be a spiritual great-great-great-grandfather. Be the spiritual father of many nations. Okay, I think I've made that point sufficiently. So let's go to number 2. What's step number 2? How do we actually make a disciple? What's it mean when you're sitting with this person, when you're spending time with this person? What do you do? What's the thing you actually do? So here's step number 2 in our IKEA instruction booklet. Point them to Jesus. You know, again, we said, we often shorten the phrase as making disciples, but disciple is a general term. What we're really making is Christians. We're making disciples of Jesus. The context of that passage, Jesus says, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. It's not teaching them to obey everything that you've got to say, is it? Your job is not to make disciples of yourself. Your job is to make disciples of Jesus. And the method for doing that is a lot different than making a disciple of yourself. It's you should disappear. All right, and I'm going to give you guys an example. So maybe you guys noticed at the back there today, I put a little special image. Maybe you guys can see it there. But here's a point I wanted to make with that image. All right, I got you guys. Ha ha ha. It was a social experiment. All of you guys looked behind you, didn't you? All right, here's my point. If you had frozen while you were looking back there, and that's an image of Jesus and his disciples, how many of you were looking at me when I pointed back at the back? None of you guys. How many of you guys were looking there because I looked there first? All of you. That's what disciple making is. It's not look at me. It's look where I'm looking. Look at the person who I'm looking at. Look where I'm headed. Would you come with me? It's a learn with me. Grow with me. Would you pursue Jesus with me? Would you give your life, everything that you have with me for Jesus? And the beauty of that is that you disappear from that equation. If you're doing discipleship well, you stop being part of the equation pretty soon. That's your goal, right? You eventually, they should be able to be so focused on Jesus that one day they look over and you've long since passed or you've moved on to other things, and it's not a bother for them because they've become so enamored with Jesus. Hebrews 12, 1-2 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." So when you make disciples, you have one job and one job only. Fix your eyes on Jesus. And I will do my best to show you how to do that. Because if you're doing things right, you've already done that. You've got your eyes fixed on Jesus. And when you have your eyes fixed on Jesus, the natural reaction of those people around you is going to be to figure out what you're looking at, right? What are you looking at? Why are you like that? Why are you so fixated on this Jesus guy? And they're going to eventually start looking where you're looking. That's disciple making. It's not about me. It's not look at me. It's look where I'm looking. All right. So one of the dangers here is that many of you guys are charismatic leaders, is what I'd call it. Charismatic. Daniel, you are a charismatic leader. Let me just tell you that among the Oaks. Charis, meaning gifts, right? Gifted leaders. Julie is a charismatic person. Pastor Kevin is charismatic. Ty is charismatic. And now, it's good to be gifted. Charisma, charis, gifted. But that can actually be a danger for your own disciple making. Because one of the problems of being very charismatic is people will naturally tend to want to look at you. Does that make sense? Now, this is not a dig on any of them. In fact, Paul had this same issue with the Corinthians. He says this, "For when one says, 'I follow Paul,' and another, 'I follow Apollos,' are you not being merely human?" I love the word merely human. It's good. "What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth." Paul had to specifically correct them. Stop following me. I am just a servant through whom you believed. Does that make sense? I am just the guy that you first saw that showed you how to believe in Jesus. That's it. I am a servant for Jesus. And it goes on to say we're co-laborers with God in the disciple-making process. So that's true discipleship. Paul is simply saying, look at Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. He's the one you need to know. I am just a servant who's here to point you to him. And this is also very relieving for many people who think, I'm not qualified to make disciples. Okay, there's some validity maybe to feeling like, I just became a believer, I don't know. But it's really not about you, so you can kind of excuse yourself, right? Whether you've been following the Lord for 5 weeks or for 50 years, there might be people in this room where it's like, I just became a Christian. I don't know that I can bring a disciple. But you're already thinking about a couple of people. What is my girlfriend going to think? What's my mom going to think? What's my roommate going to think? here's an idea. Why don't you invite them to come search with you? You could make a disciple in your very first month as a Christian if you wanted. Now, you should probably be connected with someone who has some spiritual maturity pouring into you, but it is not exclusively for the wise. And that's because if you are looking at Jesus, that's it. That's the whole game, right? So if you are just brand new to Jesus and you feel there's someone on your heart, here's your permission. Point them to Jesus. You're qualified. This is called the Great Commission. And in ministry, you use a term called commissioned ministers. But actually, before the Great Commission, Jesus says, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. So who just commissioned them? Jesus, with all the authority on heaven and earth, was given the Great Commission. So here's what I think I can say with total accuracy. You've all been commissioned by Jesus to make disciples among the lost. Okay. All right, here's point number 3. When things get difficult, persevere. Luke 15:4-7. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. We think about this all the time as Jesus going after that lost sheep. But something that rarely we think about in this? At no point does a sheep stop becoming a sheep in this parable. Everybody is part of God's fold. It's in your DNA. God's fingerprints are on your heart. No matter how far away people are, they were made to be part of God's fold. Just this last week, watching that Adam here goes out and he does evangelism every week. One of the things is that I just love about people with this perspective is that there's not hey, I'm not interested in spirituality, isn't an answer that equates for people with evangelism, is it? With an evangelism mindset, with a heart for the lost. Because it says, what do you mean? Were you not made to be in relation with your Creator? You don't want a love that lasts for eternity? There's no such thing as not interested in the gospel. You're a sheep. You belong in the fold. Does that make sense? And I just was so struck by how difficult it is, even for myself. How many people I think, I just don't want to bother. They're far. They're far, man. And I don't think that's God's heart. I think God views them as a sheep, and he wants them back. Okay. So, things are getting difficult. A lot of people say, hey, I'm not interested. I don't really want the gospel. That's not for me. Well, here's something I wanted to share with you guys. Yep. Oh, I messed it up. All right, we missed that verse. I'll just read off my thing. So, we know one of the first ever sermons recorded after the Great Commission is in Acts 19. And Paul and some of his companions, Alexander, one of them, are going to Ephesus. Now we have a book in our Bible called Ephesians. So we know that believers were made in Ephesus, don't we? But you know what the first time in Ephesus was like for them? They go in, and it says that upon hearing Alexander speak, there was a big crowd that was upset. They go, forget the gospel. We've heard all these things. We don't like the gospel. We want to hear it. They go, Alexander, you should go and speak and tell them, talk them down. It says reason with them, basically, how wrong he was, because they said on the moment that they heard that Alexander was a Jew, that they could hear that he was a Jew, for 2 full hours, they started screaming and chanting all in one voice, Hail Diana. Hail Diana, their goddess of Ephesus. And I was just thinking back, man, this last Thursday too, I watched Gabe here go up and he shared, there was a YouTuber there with 1 million subscribers, a famous atheist, and Gabe had the bravery to go up and talk to this guy and bring the gospel to him. And I could just see this guy was baiting him, and he was pushing him, and he was trying to do anything to inflame him. And Gabe ducked through each one. The whole crowd around him was shouting profanities. And when Gabe said, and you need to believe in Jesus, people started booing. But I'm telling you, when we were back in the back, there were multiple girls that thought, why are people reacting like this? We were talking to others, and they go, why is this happening? And we got the opportunity to share with them and say, yeah, it's because there's a spiritual battle going on. Are you recognizing it now? And I just think about, nothing is new. Nothing has changed in 2,000 years, all right? They got shouted down. There was struggles, and what we often think is that people are upset with me because I must not be doing things well enough. I must not be loving them properly. Okay, it's possible. It's possible. But that's not what Jesus said was going to happen to you. Jesus said, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. And Jesus says later in that passage, I tell you these things to keep you from falling away. This is supposed to be an encouragement for you. Does that make sense? This seems like it's discouraging. It's not. Jesus says this is to encourage you. If they don't like you, it's because they didn't like me first. All right? Keep persevering. You're not doing something wrong. Does that make sense? It's not, there are so many people who think, man, if you did a better job, everybody would love you. Biblically, it's not there. They would have loved you. Wouldn't they have loved Jesus being perfect? And I'm not perfect. Meaning there's lots of good reasons to be upset with me. But that's not why people are upset when you share the gospel. They're upset because of Jesus. Because something in their heart knows that this is true. And here's my point for you guys. Keep working for those people. I know some of you today have had one person on your mind and on your heart this entire sermon. You're thinking about them and you think, gosh, I've prayed for them. I've tried so hard to reach them. God, it pains me. Why did you put a love in my heart for this person when all I have to do is watch them fail over and over again? And you feel like you failed as a parent or as a disciple maker or as an evangelist, and you think, I didn't love them well enough. I did something wrong. I've made some mistakes. Guys, persevere. Keep laboring. I think if God put that person on your heart, there's a reason for it. Don't give up on that person. Here's the point. You're not failing. You're laboring. Labor. It's labor. Harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. It's not toiling in vain. Keep praying for them. Keep reaching out to them. It doesn't mean you have to be pushy. But as long as that person is still on your heart, you're not finished. All right? Jesus wasn't finished with you when you were far off, so you're not finished with that person until you've brought the gospel to them. Again, out in evangelism, I had a guy the other day who said, I don't think I ever want to go out and do this again. And I said, why? What happened? He said, I felt like I had a positive view of people until I went out and tried to start sharing the gospel. He's like, I wanted a positive view of people. Because in his mind, he knows he's going out there he's like, I'm going to love these people to death. And it's going to be amazing. And, it was amazing. But he really thought that everybody was going to love what he had to say. I love these people. Of course, they're going to sense it. And some did. To their credit, some did. But there were some who were just dripping with anger. They legitimately hate hearing the gospel. I went up to a couple of guys and I said, hey, man, do you think there's any hope in politics, or do you think our hope lies somewhere else? That's my line for when I start a conversation. And he goes, I was like, you want to talk about it? He's like, well, I know I don't agree with you. And I said, how do you know that? And he goes, I just know it. I got nothing to say to you. He was mad. And what is the only thing I said? Do you feel like you have hope? That was the word I said. And the response was harsh. So here's what I want to tell you guys today. Lost sheep are still sheep. There is nobody in your life or on your heart that doesn't at some level know Jesus is their Savior. And last story I'm going to tell you guys today. Whenever anybody tells me they're not interested in the gospel, or they're not spiritual, I know one of two things is true. One, they're just lying and they don't really want to talk to me, which is fine, all right? I've seen, you go out and you do cold call evangelism, that happens all the time. The second is that they legitimately think that, and they've been distracting themselves for a long time. At the beginning of last year at our table, we had a guy come up. His name was Jaden, and he was an athlete. And I go, hey, are you interested at all in what we're doing here? Maybe joining a Bible study, talking to somebody about your spiritual questions, or just hearing about what we're doing on campus? And he goes, no, not really. I'm not really a Christian. I'm not really a spiritual kind of guy. I said, okay, but for some reason I remembered him. And about 2 months later, when at CSU we had that baptism event with the CSU football team, I happened to see him while I'm walking over to the stadium. I'm like, Jaden, you're an athlete. These guys are athletes. They're all going to share their testimony. You should just come and listen, man. What's the worst that could happen? And he goes, oh, I got to tell you, I actually am already a Christian now. And I was like, what? And I was like, what happened? What changed you so different? He's like, I just got baptized last week. He is on fire for the Lord now, too, by the way. And you know what he said? He said, well, I'll tell you, man, I broke my leg. And I was forced to just sit in my bed and think for 2 weeks. And I became a Christian. And I thought, isn't that interesting? What a testimony that's non-exciting, but really valuable to hear. And that is that deep down, even when he was saying he wasn't interested, somewhere in his heart, when he shut off the volume of this life for just a minute, he could hear God's call on his heart. I know that people can hear that call. If you can take away just for a moment, get them to see it, get them to hear it, however that's going to be, everybody can hear God's call because we're made for God's call. We are his sheep, all of us, every one of us, even while we're lost. So the last thing I want to say today is if you are new in this room, if that's you and you know God's calling you and you've got that purpose and that calling on your life, but you've been ignoring it for a while, I'd be remiss if I didn't give the opportunity to say, maybe today's the day that you need to turn your life over to Jesus. If you are in this room and you feel like God has called on your life and you want to turn your life over to Jesus today, will you raise your hand up? We can pray with you after. Okay. Could be somebody online. Come into church. Come reach out to us. All right, good. Well, I'm glad to see all the sheep in the fold today. But I want to give you guys, at the end of all of this, here are your steps. Select a handful. Write it down right now. Say, I'm going to text you this week. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to go, hey, you had a great question the other day. You interested in maybe reading the Bible with me once a week? I'll buy coffee for you. Can you just make a commitment in your mind to say something like that to a couple of people this week, and that we as a church could reproduce spiritual generations starting here today? And then the second step again, would you point them to Jesus? And then third step is repeat steps 1 and 2 until you have nothing left in your life. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much for that chance. I just want to pray for us really quick, and then we'll invite Sister Pat and Grace up here to pray for them. Lord God, I just pray right now that you would commission everybody here as a disciple maker among the lost. Jesus, let there be nobody here whose heart is not impacted and does not want to make a disciple, Jesus. I pray right now that those that feel unqualified, that you would change that. For those people who have somebody on their heart right now and a name on their mind, let them not be able to forget it until they've texted or invited that person at the very least to come and read the Bible with them and to come to point themselves towards you, Jesus. Pray right now for all the lost sheep, God. Bring them back to your fold. Ask right now that you would help us to reproduce. Bring more people into a beautiful and loving relationship with you, God. I thank you, Lord, for this time to speak. I pray this in your name. Amen. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andy. Caleb spoke earlier about what a leader looks like, leading by example. And I just want to commend Andy because the same day that Charlie Kirk was murdered, Andy puts this out. Talk about persevering, in the face of difficulty. He writes this: many Christians are canceling their campus events this week in fear of copycat attacks. We will not be. Tomorrow we will walk back onto the college campus and we will declare the same gospel that needs to be declared. So thank Andy for what he's doing. And like he said, it's just more motivation when there's more opposition, because that equals more opportunity. So thank you. So Sister Pat and Grace Street, come on up. Anybody who would like to come and pray them to their next places, please come on up. Otherwise, we're formally dismissed. God bless your week.